This is our fifth video, our third lecture in the muscle unit. It is all about muscles of the arm. So we'll be going through muscles of the upper arm and muscles of the lower arm. The really interesting thing about the muscles of the arm has to do with the way the muscles are all arranged on the arm. So if you are looking at a model in standard anatomical position, that means palms facing forward and arms down at their sides. All of the muscles on the anterior side of the body are going to be flexors. And all of the muscles on the posterior side of the body are going to be extensors. And that is a really interesting arrangement because our legs are not really like that. And that arrangement is really unique to the arm itself. So let's look at these. So we'll start with the upper arm first and start with the big one. This is the biceps brachii. The biceps, you probably know it simply as biceps. Remember that seps means heads, and so anytime we see seps in the name of a muscle, we know that it has 2 origin points or 3 origin points or 4 origin points, depending on what it is we're looking at. This is the biceps brachii, which means we have 2 origin points. They are both on the scapula. So we know that is where it gets its name, is from those 2 origin points on the scapula. Then we have our insertion point on the radial tuberosity. So that's down here. That's a really big insertion point. And the action is to flex the forearm. So to raise that lower arm towards the upper arm, to flex the forearm. Then we have the brachialis. This does almost the same job as the biceps, except the biceps is the prime mover. The brachialis is a synergist and a sister muscle, and its origin is here on the humerus, and its insertion point is down here on the ulna. Again, its action is to flex the forearm. Then we have our brachioradialis. Its origin is on the humerus, and its insertion is on the radius. Again, it is a synergist of the biceps brachii, which means its action is to flex the forearm. And as you can see, all of these muscles are on the anterior side of the body when we are in standard anatomical position. So that's where you're seeing that pattern already starting to arise, with flexors on the anterior side, extensors on the posterior side. Speaking of extensors, here is our first one. This is triceps brachii. This is the antagonist to biceps brachii during flexion, and it is the prime mover during extension of the forearm. Its origin is here on the scapula and on the humerus, because remember, it has 3 different origin points. Its insertion is down here on the ulna. And then its action, like I said before, is extension of the forearm. It's the prime mover for forearm extension. Now we are moving down to the lower half of the arm, and we are going to be looking at the anterior side again. So we're looking at flexors, and we have 2 muscles we're going to talk about. Flexor carpi radialis first, and here it is. Flexor carpi radialis, its origin is here on the humerus, and its insertion is all the way down here at your metacarpal, your second metacarpal to be exact. You can just say metacarpals on your sheet. That's fine with me. And then its action is to flex the wrist. And you can really tell that from its name. It says flexor carpi, and carpi is the same word for wrist that you see in like carpal bones or metacarpals. And then flexor, of course, means to flex. So flexor carpi radialis is really helpful for remembering where it is, so where its location is, and its action, because it tells you right here, this is the one that's going to be on the radius side of your arm. Then flexor carpi ulnaris. Again, the origin is here on the humerus, and its insertion point is down here in the metacarpals as well, specifically the fifth metacarpal, but you can just say metacarpals. And again, its action is to flex the wrist. So anytime that you're pulling your hand up, this is what's doing that. That's that flexor carpi ulnaris. Palmaris longus. Palmaris longus is a relatively small muscle in humans. Its origin is, again, here on the humerus, and it actually has quite a few insertion points all throughout the hand, all along these digits, these metacarpals. And its big job is to flex the hand, to really close the hand. Some people have had this cut or sliced, and they can no longer close their hand. And you can kind of test this. If you can touch your thumb to your pinky, your palmaris longus is still intact and really quite flexible. In cats, this is a huge muscle that just takes up almost all of this side of the arm. And the reason for that is a cat really needs to be able to make sure it has a strong grip on its prey. So it really needs to make sure that its fingers close around its prey. Now, our next one, we're moving to the posterior side of the arm. So we're moving to the back, which means we're going to be talking about extensors. And specifically, we're going to be talking about extensor carpi radialis brevis. We'll have another couple of extensor carpi muscles in just a few minutes. So brevis, its origin point, is on the humerus. Its insertion point is here at the third metacarpal. And so you can see how it's going to be pulling that wrist back. So this is to extend the hand at the wrist. That's why it's an extensor. Brevis has to do with how short the muscle fibers are. That's how that name comes about. And you'll see this in just a minute. When we look at longus, you can see just how much longer those muscles are. So the origin, again, on extensor carpi radialis longus is the humerus. Its insertion point is here at the first metacarpal, the second metacarpal. And its action is, again, to extend the hand at the wrist. So it's really opening up that hand again. Then you have extensor carpi ulnaris. This one's going to be on the ulna side instead of the radius side that we were looking at with the last two muscles. So extensor carpi ulnaris, it has its origin here on the humerus, and its insertion point is here on the fifth metacarpal. And again, it extends the hand at the wrist. Then we have, finally, extensor digitorum. Extensor digitorum, its origin is on the medial end of the humerus. So again, on the humerus. Then it has insertion points similar to palmaris longus on the other side. It has all of these lovely insertion points here on our phalangeal bones, which is really great for dexterous movement. It really gives us a lot of movement in our fingers. And its action is to extend our 4 digits. So that is the last of our forearm muscles, and I've run out of time. So move on to the next one.